Welcome to Divorced Muslims, A Second Chance, the podcast that uplifts voices for both divorced and single Muslims. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah amma ba'd. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to all our listeners, and welcome to another episode of our podcast, Divorced Muslims, A Second Chance. Now, in today's episode, we are joined by Sister Radiya, who I would say is, I guess, a big influencer on social media. Her TikTok handle is PS We Got This. So, without wasting any time, over to you, Radiya. Assalamu alaikum, and introduce yourself to our listeners.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for a lovely introduction. My name is Radiya and I run a TikTok channel called PS We Got This. And it started when I got divorced 2 years ago. It was quite a big life transition for me. But since then, I feel like I've reflected a lot. I've thought a lot about myself. I've come to a lot of new understandings about myself, about the culture and the society that we live in, and identified some really interesting insights and patterns about the things that influence us. They influence the way that we live and the way that we love. And I like to talk about those insights on my channel, and that's why I'm here today. I think that if we understand ourselves better, we can live life with more purpose and we can live it more intentionally. And inshallah, that purpose can help us feel more fulfilled. And that will be, inshallah, fulfillment in this life and in the hereafter. And that fulfillment can come whether we are single, married, or divorced.
I know that a lot of sisters in particular resonate with some of the things that you say, which brings me on to my next question or theme. It's public knowledge that you are divorced. First of all, how long ago was your divorce?
My divorce was 2 years ago.
And how long were you married for?
About 6 years, just over 6 years.
And how did you come across your ex-partner?
We actually met on a Muslim dating app, interestingly enough.
Okay. Fair enough. And I guess what would be interesting now is to hear in your own words, like your divorce story. Tell us what happened. How did it all end, etc.
I feel like in our culture, we marry because it's the right thing to do, or it's the next step, or it's what other people want for us. And so that's what both of us did in our own life paths. I think both of our intentions coming into the marriage were different and they were not aligned. He got married maybe for the sake of his family, for the sake of pressure, for the sake of doing the right thing, for giving, his parents grandchildren. And I got married because I thought it was the right step and the next thing to do in life, just after getting my education and after going to university. The misalignment showed up when we got married. I was busy serving his parents. I was busy fulfilling all the duties and the roles of what a good wife and a good daughter-in-law would do. I think the misalignment showed up because I don't think he was fulfilled and I don't think I was fulfilled either. Ultimately, in the marriage, I don't believe any of us were acting with honor and respect for ourselves, respect for the marriage, respect for Allah and what he wanted for us. And because I was struggling in the marriage, my mental health was being harmed, my iman was being harmed, my life was not being fulfilled. And because my children were witnessing an unhealthy relationship, I decided to leave. And leaving was actually such a blessing because, alhamdulillah, now because of divorce, my children now do get 2 happy parents, a happy mother, a happy father, and 2 happy homes.
So my next question is, what impact did divorce have on you?
Divorce actually broke me. And it didn't just break me mentally, physically. I mean, I was shattered and I slept for about 6 months. But it broke me physically, it broke me mentally, and it broke every belief that I had about myself, about my family, about the people around me. It shattered all my beliefs. It shattered everything about me. And it really made me think deeply about myself and question everything that I knew. That's the biggest thing. It made me question every single thing that I thought that I knew. because my whole life I was going down one path, studying, being a good daughter, educating myself, and then getting married, having children. I was doing what society thought was good. I was doing what I was told. I was blindly going down life's path, the way it was laid out for me and the way that I was instructed to. And when that didn't work out for me, meaning I wasn't happy, I thought if you do what everyone says, everything works out fine. If you follow the instructions, generally things will work out for you. If you behave well and if you act good, things will work out. So when my marriage, quote unquote, failed, it shook everything and it shook me to my core. And I guess that was the beginning of me opening my eyes and opening my mind and really started to think about life deeply and thinking about what we've told and what we've been led to believe.
If I was to ask you, did you make any mistakes in your marriage? What would you say?
I wouldn't say that I made any mistake with ill intentions, or I wouldn't say that I made any mistakes on purpose, but in some way, I feel like we all play a part in how we end up. And I know some things are kismet and some things are from Allah, but sometimes in life we do have to take control. Like I did choose my ex-husband. I did choose to marry him. And then I have to think about why did I make the choices that I made? I think if we gain a better understanding of why we think the way that we do and whether that's our original thought or whether we've been influenced, then that will help us make clearer decisions moving forward and it can prevent people making bad decisions.
Okay. And Radiya, how did you bounce back from the situation that you were in?
I don't believe that you actually bounce back. Bouncing back sounds like you wake up one day and everything's okay. I don't believe that happens after a divorce. And you never bounce back. You can never become the person that you were before you got married. In some ways, before you're married, you may be naive or you may have a positive and hopeful view of the world. When you leave a marriage, it's not that you are bitter and pessimistic and have a negative attitude for the rest of your life. It's more that you can still be a positive person, more that you have more information now that you're more informed about life. You have a bit more wisdom, actually, I would say.
Let's move on to some general questions that I had for you, right? No doubt that generally speaking, Muslims and even British Muslims in particular are finding it difficult to get married. There's no doubt there's a marriage crisis. Why do you think that is the case? What do you think the problem is?
I believe the problem is our level of emotional maturity. And I know that sounds like an insult, and I don't want to insult anyone. But as we're growing up and as we're 18, 19, 20, I believe that all of us are finding ourselves. Immature is, an offensive word. We are all finding ourselves. So to rush into marriage and searching for a second person that's outside of your own self is challenging. And I don't think we talk about that enough. I think that the previous generation, they did marry young. And my own mom, she married when she was 18. And I think my grandma, she married when she was probably like 16 years old. So traditionally in the other generations, people did marry young. And it was acceptable for the emotional self to not have been fully developed. And I believe people got married without questioning or without really having a choice of who they married and without really saying no. And because of that, nobody held them accountable and said, actually, you're not grown up yet. Actually, you don't have enough compassion yet. Actually, you don't have enough empathy. Nobody was holding anyone accountable or rigorously testing for those things. And I feel like now, because we have a choice in who we marry, and we choose our partners and we talk to our future partners and we assess them, we assess each other, and we hold each other to standards in our 20s that they aren't even fully developed yet, and we're quick to judge people on them and say, actually, no, I'm choosing not to get married to you. And that's okay because we are allowed to choose. I mean, Islam is very pro choice when it comes to marriage and when it comes to divorce. So I think what we're really seeing here is choice and the outcome and the result of us having choice. In the elder generations, I don't believe they had much choice.
Talking of choice, right? If you had the choice between being born and part of the older generation or being part of the era that you were born in, Which one would you go for in the context of marriage?
I would happily stay in my current generation. I hear this a lot nowadays. It's that a lot of girls are saying this is actually the first time ever we are the first girls in our generation out of all of our millions and millions of ancestors of women who have now the ability to earn money for ourselves or to buy our own house and to live by ourselves and to actually choose whether or not to get married. And it's kind of mind-boggling when you think of it that way. I would much rather have the choice. I feel like because previously with arranged marriages, issues didn't show up. They showed up after marriage. It's not that marriage is a problem. I don't think finding someone to marry is the problem. The problem is we are assessing each other so early that the issues are showing up before we agreed to marry. So it's not like we can say that the girls nowadays are worse, the boys nowadays are worse. I don't think that's the case. I feel like girls have always been the same, women have always been the same, and men have always been the same, regardless of which generation they're born in. And when people married young, they gave each other the chance to overcome or maybe change after marriage. And some people changed for the better and some people actually didn't. And nowadays, we don't actually take that risk. And I'm not saying that we should. I'm not saying that the solution is that we go back to arranged marriages and just quickly, tie the knot and commit our entire lives to people that we don't actually know. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just identifying why the issues or the things that you don't like about someone are being highlighted. They're being brought to the surface, if that makes sense. And now we're complaining about it. We're saying these awful habits are being brought to the surface and they're being brought to the surface. Like we're upset that they're being brought to light, but it's not the bad habits or the inadequacies themselves that are a problem. They were always there in every generation. It's just that we are shining a spotlight on them right now.
All right. So, next question. What's the difference between having standards and having unrealistic expectations?
I think a theme that I want to talk about here is modeling. So a lot of us and a lot of the people that I speak to, we say that there aren't any good marriages that we've actually seen. Maybe you haven't seen a great, loving, open, thriving, love marriage between your mum and your dad, your own parents, or, between aunties and uncles, your own, kala kalu. If you haven't seen love thriving and how they're supporting each other, and we haven't seen it. So when now, we're looking for marriage, we don't know what to ask for because we don't know what's ridiculous and what's actually realistic because we haven't seen it. So we're just kind of plucking things out of thin air, or we're plucking things out of movies, or plucking things from social media or from couples that look perfect on social media, thinking that it's realistic to ask for those things. And because there's a lack of modeling and we don't know what's realistic and what isn't, it seems like we're asking for too much. But would urge us to look deeper than that. So if someone's asking for like a bunch of 1,000 roses, people are just quick to be like, oh, like what is she asking for? But I feel like us as humans, we all want the same thing. We all want to be loved and we all want to be seen. So we kind of need to see through the standards and understand what people want. And I feel like there's miscommunication between the genders as well. So girls don't understand what guys want and guys don't understand what girls want. And there's miscommunication because we just don't have that true understanding of each other and what each other's needs are. And I feel like we don't have the kindness as well to have that deeper understanding.
You spoke about choice. People talk about the paradox of choice concept, where that's actually worked against people looking for marriage than in favor. What's your thoughts around that?
We as a society are expecting young people in their 20s to deal with that all by themselves. And I know it sounds like I'm complaining because, we've barely gotten elders to accept love marriages and we want to marry someone of our own choice. And what's happened is I feel like we've backed off completely from helping somebody make that decision. And we're asking somebody that can be very young to assess their own emotional health and well-being, and then to assess the emotional well-being of the person that they're interested in. We're asking them to dissect a lot of information without knowing themselves. And that's why I think it's important to have a truer understanding of yourself and also allow yourself to grow up and see the world a little bit more before making that decision. I feel like I just feel like it's a lot to ask from young people. And that's why younger people, they're feeling a lot of stress and there's a lot of frustration because they can't answer that for themselves. They can't find the perfect person and they're beating themselves up about it. But I don't want them to have that frustration. I feel like I want people to understand and be kinder to themselves, to understand that they're dealing with something that's really emotionally taxing. Feel like they should have the choice and also be given grace and kindness and allow them to make that choice, understanding that they may make some mistakes and it may hurt and it may take a lot of hard work for them to do. And yes, they should be able to work on themselves and that will help them ultimately make a better choice. Because we've gone so quickly from arranged marriages to go find somebody that you're absolutely in love with, I feel like the permission for us to marry who we want to hasn't been given with grace and understanding.
So, talking of this whole aspect of choice, what's come up now above the surface is this whole idea of green flags and red flags when you're looking for marriage. So, my question to you is, are green flags more important than red flags?
Absolutely. In a lot of my comments, people ask, what are the red flags? Tell me the red flags. And we focus a lot on, let's talk to a guy. If they show any, like, if they show if they show one red flag or two red flags, then it's an absolute no. So we are very much aware of what we're running away from. And the reason why that is, if we go back to my theme of modeling, that's what we're used to. We're used to seeing bad relationships. So it's easier to run from a whole load of bad potential relationships, but actually we don't know what we're running towards. And we need to, as a society, we need to get better at identifying healthy behaviors and identifying what we're running towards so that we can actually build those characteristics inside ourselves at the same time so we can improve as a whole. And once we are surrounded ourselves by, our brothers who are in great relationships and sisters who are in great relationships, or maybe our friends who are modeling great relationships, the more we can understand green flags, then we know what it looks like and we can visualize it and we can, manifest it or pray for it, or we can understand it better and we can be attracted to it. At this point, if we just keep talking about red flags, we're just going to keep running. And that's what's happening now is, marriage is becoming more and more scarce because we're all running away from it. We're acting out of fear. We're acting out of panic. All we know is the elder generation, they look unhappy or they seem unhappy. And, as an entire generation, all we know is we know that we do not want that. But what is it that we do want? So green flags are important.
So, how I've interpreted that is look at the glass half full rather than half empty.
You're
Maybe
saying that if a person has green and red flags, that we should focus more on the green and ignore the red flags. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that at all. I'm asking you, is that how you kind of answer the question?
I feel like red flags, you just run.
All right. So the next question relates to an argument that
Mhm.
I'm going to put forward, and I just want you to give your views on that, right? Upon analyzing the whole marriage search in contemporary times, an argument that is often put forward is that subconsciously, most British Muslims don't actually want marriage. They want the benefits of marriage without responsibility. They want companionship, but not commitment. Marriage has become optional, not a priority. What's your
Mhm.
thoughts around this?
I think I agree. Marriage is a title and it's a responsibility and it's a lot of work. It's a commitment. The benefits of marriage are, thousandfold. There are so many beautiful benefits of marriage. And that is, intimacy, emotional connection, having support, having someone look after you, love, the absence of loneliness. There are so many benefits. And who doesn't want that? No, everybody would love all of the benefits that I've just listed. If you have all of that, you have a great life. And it's very easy to get that in a marriage. I feel like I can bring this back to the identity of us as British Muslims. I feel that as a group of people, there are a lot of things that are missing in our life. A lot of us feel lonely and a lot of us feel cold and a lot of us feel unloved. And I'm not saying that's everyone, but I feel like this ties back to how our parents or how our grandparents migrated. When they migrated, they actually went through a traumatic time and that impacted them. That also impacted the way they parented and loved their children. And it's really sad, because they left their own parents, they left their family structures and they left their systems. And they did go through a difficult time. However, that has impacted us, the children and the grandchildren. And believe a lot of us are not as loved as we should be. And so being in a romantic relationship outside of marriage, I guess, is very easy to get into, but it fulfills some basic emotional needs that we do have. And that's what people want. I can sense in a lot of British Muslims that there is a lack of emotional connection and a lack of emotional fulfillment. And I'll give you an example. So, do you know about the five love languages? There are five love languages: words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, gifts, and acts of service. And, you get that from your parents, you get that from the people around you. But what if, because of, traumatic times, maybe things that your parents went through, or your grandparents went through, a lot of families are lacking in a lot of those love languages. The easiest way to fulfill that lack is to just be in a romantic relationship with somebody. And to be in a relationship with somebody without having the responsibility of marriage, without having the responsibility of, children, or without having to financially take care of people, put a roof over someone else's head. It's a win situation, but the problem is that it's damaging in the long term. I think that leads to emotional fulfillment in the short term, and it solves their problem right now. But what happens when you break up? When you break up, you're left again with the absence, you're left again with the black hole, and you're left again with that coldness and the absence of love. And this is why I believe the answer is not in jumping from relationship to relationship to relationship. The answer really does lie within yourself. And I know that sounds really cheesy. And there's a lot of discussion nowadays about self-love. But the difference for us Muslims is that we have something that's more powerful than self-love, because it's really difficult to kind of love yourself if you don't know if you don't know what that means or how to do it. But we do have like our iman, and we have a purpose. And our purpose in life, and the reason why we were put on this earth, was to worship Allah. And that does satisfy a lot of fulfillment if we let it.
Okay, so the next point I want to discuss is in relation to apps. Interestingly, you mentioned that you met your ex-partner through an app, right? Now, apps are arguably the biggest player when it comes to the whole marriage search. So my question to you is, have apps improved or damaged the marriage search? Are people genuinely serious, or are they emotionally browsing? And do apps reward honesty or perfection? What's your thoughts around this?
Think having an app installed on your phone is kind of like giving someone actually a powerful weapon and saying to them, here's this magic thing, and you can do whatever you want using it, and nobody will ever know. And with this app, it allows you to be the lowest of the low or the highest of the high. So this is the difference between humans and angels. An angel does not have nafs, and they will pray and worship, and they will stay in sujood for the entirety of their existence because they're praying to Allah. But Allah gave us nafs, and Allah gave us a desire. You give people an app and your nafs goes, I can do what I want right now. And then it's a question, you're in private, you're in your own room, you're in, nobody's looking, nobody's watching, and you can be whoever you want to be. Now, in that moment, in that state, you will revert to your principles and your core principles. And going back to the emotional health and the integrity of British Muslims nowadays, I feel like we are struggling. I feel like our principles are slowly getting lower and lower. And I feel like we need to work on our strength, on our iman, and who are we? What do we stand for? I'm not just talking about the men. I'm talking about women and girls too. All of us individuals as people, what do you stand for? And the truth of what you really stand for comes to light, and it comes to surface when you are in the privacy and in the anonymity of the apps. Another point I'd like to make is I'm not just talking about the lustful ways that people use apps. There are also ways of using apps to present yourself as absolutely amazing, as saints, as really great people. So apps are just a mask and a filter that you can use to put over yourself and present yourself in any way that you wish. And the question then is about your principles and your integrity. I believe the apps are great to allow you access to people that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. But even though that sounds like an advantage, it's overwhelming. Looking at statistics, and girls can have like thousands and thousands of matches, and guys can have like 20. So it is really unfair. There's an imbalance there. So it makes it really difficult for you to filter through filter through to connections that are really meaningful. And so the apps become, I wouldn't say a waste of time. They become a great expense. You expend a lot of time in there, a lot of energy without getting much. And I don't know how effective I can say that the results are.
Let's move on to parents or family involvement in the marriage search. Many a times, whether you're a brother or a sister, family is involved when you're looking for marriage. And there's this sort of conflict or difference of opinion when family is involved, whether it constitutes advice or control. Where do you draw the line?
I believe that what we need to do as individuals, and I believe that what we need to do as individuals is have a truer understanding of ourselves. Because there's a saying of something like, if a man stands for nothing, he will fall for anything. If you don't know what your own opinion is or what your own decision is, how can you analyze somebody else's decision and think about whether that's good or bad? So I feel like you should generally have an idea yourself about, the idea that you guys are debating, to understand what it is that you want. I think it's important to align yourself firstly to Allah and make sure the thing that you guys are like debating or discussing, you want to first think about the outcome that is best going to please Allah first and foremost. After that, just have a good think about, what does your gut say? What do you actually feel? And you should take mashwara and advice from your parents. I feel like that's a respectful thing. I know there are situations where people have toxic parents, people who have parents who abuse them, like actually hurt them. And I know that some people have parents that harm them or actually on purpose sabotage their children's lives. However, if you are that person and you know your parents are like that, again, your gut is telling you these people want to harm me. So you can also make your own decision that way. So I think overall, have a good understanding of who you are and who your parents are. I can't, I can't put a blanket statement out saying everyone listen to your parents, because everyone's human at the end of the day. You get good parents, unfortunately, you do get parents that may want to harm you. So think more about yourself and think about what your own happiness, think about Allah's happiness, but take mashwara and take mashwara and just have a think about it. Trust your gut at the end of the day. Trust your intuition. Allah has given everyone intuition, and Allah has given everyone the freedom to control their own to control their own lives and to own their own narrative and to make their own decisions. It's also true that you will sometimes make the wrong choice and make the wrong decision. And sometimes you'll come back to your parents crying and say, I should have listened to you guys in the first place. And that's part of life. It's okay to make mistakes. Another saying that I live by is, you don't have to make the right decision. You make the decision right. So you can decide east or west. You can decide anything. But once you've made your decision, make sure it's the correct one. And feel free to go back on your own decision. I mean, it's life. It's a journey. Own your mistakes. Own the lessons that life has taught you, and carry on striving for good.
Okay. Let's talk about fear based marriages. And the question I have for you is fear a valid reason to marry? So, for example, brothers and sisters, once they hit the age of 30 or the 30 plus, an argument put forward is options get worse after 30 or options decrease after 30. Is fear a valid reason to marry?
I guess what you're asking is it okay to settle when you've been told you can't actually get better than this? Options are only going to get worse. If you stay single now, you're going to be lonely forever. So you might as well settle for the next guy that comes along. My gut is saying, no, absolutely not. Don't do it. However, for some people, the fear is real. And if you ask my actual opinion, I would say, obviously, the word fear sounds big and scary, but any reason is a valid reason to get married. You can, if you're okay with that, you should happily get married. I feel like if you believe the reason you want to get married is a valid reason, you should. If you genuinely want to, for example, increase your chances of getting pregnant and have a baby, and it's what you've always wanted to do, and you feel like the person that you've chosen is, good for you, then you should. Then you should listen to what you want. I feel like, nowadays we push the narrative that you have to be absolutely in love. They have to be your best friend. The standards have to be so high. They have to be rich, and all of these really great expectations that we put on, finding someone to marry. But if you're okay with having a connection with someone and finding an arrangement that works for you, it could be two people are super busy, they never see each other besides like twice a year or something. If that works, it works. I feel like you can get married for lots of reasons. If you look at the Prophet ﷺ and his wives, and you look into the reasons of why he married each one, they are all actually different scenarios. It happened that way so that we as a ummah could learn lessons from that. So, for example, Hazrat Sauda, radiallahu ta'ala anha, was old. And she knew at the time of marrying Prophet ﷺ that she was old. And she actually, I mean, not to say in Gen Z terms, but she was chilling. Like she was fine. She had the Prophet ﷺ to look after her, and she didn't need the companionship as much. So she gave up her night. So the Prophet ﷺ had lots of wives, and he would stay with them or give them enough time and have them in rotation. But Hazrat Sauda radiallahu ta'ala anha, she was confident in herself. She was secure in the reason why she got married. She agreed to the marriage. And then she said, actually, I don't need that companionship for the night. And she gave up her share on her time slot for Hazrat Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. And that's what happens when a woman knows herself. She knows what she wants. She knows her own intentions, and she knows her purpose in the world. That's the beauty of knowing your own identity as a woman. You know what you want. And whether if you want to be a career-minded woman and, see your husband here, like, here and there, and then he's also okay with that, it's okay to marry for whatever reasons that you have.
All right. So, a common scenario that comes in today's day and age is that, people are getting to know people for marriage and it doesn't work out. So you often ask them, okay, what's the reason? And a typical response comes as follows: I was good enough to talk to, but not good enough to marry. People want emotional intimacy without commitment. In other words, people are having long conversations, emotional sharings going on.
Yeah.
Marriage talks then become real, and then the connection ends. What's your thoughts around this?
I think it comes back to the lack of emotional fulfillment that we have as a society, and we are getting the hits of dopamine from talking. And because we're getting the dopamine, we're blinded and we're not thinking long term. There might have been a red flag at the start. You were thinking maybe your parents were not going to allow you to marry her in the first place because you were from a different caste. But because you were so blinded by the dopamine hits you were getting and the conversation and all the other intimacy that you were getting, at the last minute when reality catches up, or when you realize that actually I'm not going to fight for this person, it all just falls apart. So I know non-Muslims now are trying to do this thing where they don't do wifey duties. I know that there's a shift happening with women all over the world now where we're saying, don't do wifey duties for someone that hasn't put a ring on your finger. And that's things like, don't be cooking dinner, don't be doing laundry, don't be living with people, living with someone and doing all of their chores. And I feel like as Muslim women, we could take a lesson from that. What about the emotional labor that we're doing when talking to someone? The emotional support you're giving, maybe you're giving little gifts, acts of service, the verbal affirmation. Sometimes we are doing too much, and we say this is, to get to know each other because you kind of want to like sample before you buy. But I feel like, there should be a limit.
All right. So the next question is, let's talk about the stigma around being divorced. Now, this is a two-way argument, right? One might argue that the stigma has decreased as we've hit 2026 compared to where we were, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years ago. Another person may argue, actually, no, the stigma is as real and as impactful as it was 30, 40 years ago. But there's no doubt that there's a stigma around individuals who are divorced. Why is it so stigmatized?
Like, I feel like being divorced is very loud. It's very visible. It's very external, and it's very clear and obvious. So back when parents and families were arranging our marriages for us, you could easily assess someone and look for indicators to see whether they are a good match for their child or a bad match for their child. And it's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to assess people, but they found a shortcut. And one of the assumptions was made that A divorced person has obviously been through a difficult time. They've been through trauma. They've been through some trouble. And because of that trouble, it may mean that they are emotionally unhealthy. It's very easy to assume that when someone has been through a divorce, they have been through trauma. What I'm trying to say is, as a society, we kind of think that people who haven't been through trauma are easier and emotionally healthier than people who have been divorced. But what I'm trying to say is, if you go through trauma, regardless of what it is, if you don't process that properly, that there's a wound, right? And when people trigger that wound and you haven't healed from that, what's the consequence? You're not ready. And I think my other point I'm trying to say is, divorce is a very loud, obvious trauma. But there are other traumas that are ignored in our society. There's childhood abuse. There's, neglect from parents. There's abuse from parents. There's bullying. There's all sorts of ways that you can be traumatized and hurt. But we just pretend that if we don't talk about them, you can carry on acting fine. But those things all affect you. But divorce, because it's so loud and external and because you can see it. When a couple divorce, it indicates that either the man or the woman or both of them have been through pain and have been through hardship. And it's implied that the people that are coming out of a divorce are traumatized or have been through pain. And in our culture, is seen as a bad thing. We never talk about pain. We never talk about trauma. We always put on a kind face. We always put on a good face. We act like everything is perfect and we perform. And we act like, and we think the external performance equals emotional healthiness and emotional maturity. But that's not the case. Because divorce is so visible, the breakdown of a marriage, which is seen as then a failure, is seen as a bad thing.
Okay, so here's a question for you. Why is a man who is divorced often seen as experienced, but a divorced woman is seen as baggage?
I didn't know divorced men are seen as experienced, are they?
So the point being made here is you have a man divorced and you have a woman that's divorced. They're not seen on the same
The
playing
man
field.
gets the bad label, the man gets the positive label and the girl gets the negative label.
Yeah. Not by everyone, I'm not generalizing, but it's often what I've seen anyway.
I feel like that's unfair.
Yes, we know that, Radia. But the question is, why? Why does society think like that?
Men are always seem like they're doing something, like they're doing a favor for the woman, and the woman is being a burden on men. Why is it that women are seen as burdens? A lot of women have been expected to prove their worth, and I think that's just awful. And I believe a woman's beauty and her worth comes simply from her existence. The women in the older generation have proved their worth. They have worked and migrated from other countries, and they have sewn clothes. Fingers have bled. They've been left hungry whilst they fed men, whilst they fed the people around them so that the men could go to work, and so that they have gone hungry so that their children could eat. And they have worked and worked themselves tirelessly to the bone, which has gone against us, I feel. And now that women want to be valued simply for their existence or to be appreciated just because, the fact that they give children and raise them, we're being made to seem that we're asking for too much. And women are seen as burden when they're not working hard enough. And that's really sad.
Okay, here's my next question. Sometimes a divorced person finds that once their status is known, i.e. the marital status,
Mm-hmm.
interest in them drops sharply. So at this point, they start to consider delaying disclosure of the fact that they are divorced just to be seen as a person first. We've got this balancing exercise of being honest and essentially protecting yourself in order to get married. What's your thoughts around that? Delaying the disclosure of the fact that you are divorced initially when getting to know someone for marriage, in order essentially to improve your chances with the view to telling them eventually in the future.
I feel like it's really unfair that when people are searching to get married and they hear the word divorce, they automatically make a lot of assumptions about the person. The assumptions that they make are negative. So they think that this person, they've been divorced, they're probably great at arguing, or this person probably can't get along with another person, and that's why they're divorced. But we don't look at the positives. People who are divorced they've basically passed the exam of marriage like 50%. I do believe divorced people should be given a chance to get to be seen as a human and as a person, and a connection could build. I feel like it's a bit more of a serious secret to keep. I feel like disclosure of past relationships to a certain extent, I mean, you don't want to give too much information. It actually does help you understand the other person and understand each other. So it can deepen connection. Interestingly enough, though, when I was on the apps just a little while ago, and as I was speaking to divorced people, it was annoying actually because the first conversation would be about divorce. And obviously, you're going to have the same views. It's basically a commonality between you two. And I see the need to not talk about divorce because just because you agree on the divorce topic, that doesn't mean you're fated to be together. And it becomes something to talk about. And it takes away from the human connection. Do I even like this person? Do I like this person, who they are and what they stand for? Or are we just like two best friend aunties yapping over a cup of tea about divorce and about how difficult marriage is?
Okay. My last question is, so if we know that there's a problem here and people are finding it difficult to get married,
Yeah.
in your opinion, what's the solution here?
I think we can only control whatever we have in our own hands, whatever is in our ability to control. If you desperately want to get married, you can't force somebody to marry you. And I think the only thing that we can control is ourselves. And I feel like we're rushing so much, and I feel like we need to pause and take a breath and look at our own status, whether it's single, in a marriage, divorced. We need to sit with the current status that we do have. And if you want to change that, single and you want to be married, divorced and you want to be married, you can do the best that you can and actively look, but you also have to accept your kismet of today. My answer actually has nothing to do with marriage. Regardless of your status, whether you're single, whether you're married and you're happily married, or whether you're married and you're unhappy in your marriage, or whether you're divorced, no matter who you are and you're listening to this, I feel like you need to pause for a second and assess your current situation and label it and say, this is actually what I am right now. And there's a reason that you are what you are. It's because Allah has written in your kismet that today, for example, today, Radia, you are single because that's what Allah has written for you for today. You don't have to be depressed about it because it doesn't mean this is your permanent situation. You just have to accept it for today and then take control of your own life and take control of your own narrative. The only thing that can change kismet is dua. So inshallah, we are praying on namaz. And when you make dua, ask Allah for the change that you want. That is in your control. You have the freedom to ask Allah for whatever you want, regardless of how ridiculous that sounds. And you should pray and pray and make dua for anything that you want. Allah will either accept it for you in this world or He will give you better in this world. And if both of those scenarios aren't true, you will get something in the hereafter. When you make your dua, beg and cry and do whatever you want to do. Start your dua with Durood Sharif and end it with Durood Sharif. So when you're making your dua and you finish your dua, visualize that happening. Visualize yourself letting go of the request that you have given to the Almighty. But visualize it leaving your body. I feel like we're so heartbroken and we're full of yearning and loneliness, but we carry the pain inside. And I know that it hurts and I know that there's something else that you want, but you have to let it go sometimes and just be in the moment and live your day. After your dua, you leave that in Allah's hands. And then you look at your current status and you think about, what has Allah given me today? And that brings me to something like gratitude. But also, you should honor yourself. So Allah has given you this beautiful status of being single, for example. He's given me the beautiful status of being divorced. Now, what am I going to do about that situation? How am I going to be the most beautiful divorced person that Allah wishes me to be today? Then with clarity, you can live with purpose for today. When you honor yourself and you honor and respect your own singleness, for example, you are going to be the best single person out there. You aren't going to lower yourself down to your nafs. You're going to make the most of your own situation and you're going to take advantage of yourself being single and you're going to go out there, volunteer, chase your dreams, chase your hobbies, do all of the things that, us single mums who are trapped in our houses past 6 p.m. because we're putting the kids to bed, do the things that we're not able to do. So go out there and live your lives and live with purpose and live with intention and fulfill your dreams. You don't know who you'll meet along the way and it may happen, it may not happen, but that's why you leave it in Allah's hands.
Words of wisdom there by Sister Radiya.
I have something to add, talking about success metrics, the stigma of divorce. So the elder generation actually define your success by whether you're married or not. And because everybody was married, they saw that as a healthy functioning society. But that's not true. How do we actually measure success? We measure success by living in obedience to Allah and with Allah's pleasure and displeasure. That's how we actually measure success. So in our generation, when we have, I don't know what the statistics are exactly, but maybe there are less married people than in the elder generation. Maybe we have like 50% married and 50% unmarried. But does that mean that we fail as a generation? No. It could be that the 50% of people that are married are doing amazing. And if Allah has blessed them with children, they're raising them with high iman and with love. But it could be that the people who are single are driving with medicine and aid to the countries that need it the most. So when we look at society as a whole, if we are all functioning and being great people and great Muslims, that means we live in a well-functioning and a successful society according to the measures that matter the most. So I feel like we need to really own our narrative. We need to own our singleness. We need to own our divorcedness or our marriedness. Whatever title and status that Allah has blessed you with, own it. Act right. Be the greatest version of yourself that you can be. And if other people are saying, oh, you're no good because you're not married, it will just be water off a duck's back. Because you don't have to pay any attention to that, because you know in your heart what the true measure of success is. So nothing should make you feel rubbish. Nothing should be putting you down. You shouldn't feel broken. You shouldn't feel wrong for not being married. And I guess that's another reason why I don't like calling it a marriage crisis. Why rush for something that you haven't been blessed with? You can work towards something, you can pray for something, but why are you rushing for something that may never happen? It's okay to want something, but don't beat yourself up about it, and don't be unkind to yourself. Don't think of yourself as a failure just because you don't have something that you really, really want. The most beautiful things have come from a place of yearning and a place of heartbrokenness. When you're heartbroken is when you're the closest to Allah, and maybe that's the point.
So, okay, we're going to play a couple of games, and I know that you don't know anything about the first game. I call it the red light, green light game. Okay, I'm going to give you a few scenarios, and you're going to tell me whether you're giving the person the red light, the green light, or you've got the option of amber light. Okay, so a potential with no job but good deen.
Don't put me in this situation. For me personally,
Yes, I'm not asking about your next door neighbor.
is he a good cook?
I don't know.
Tell me, is he a good cook?
I have no idea. The scenario is there as it is for everyone else. No job but good deen. Red, amber, or green.
If he's a good cook, green.
A person on the deen but has a previous criminal conviction.
If he's genuinely on the deen, the criminal conviction shouldn't be haram, right? It should be okay, acceptable.
Right, so what light are you giving?
Green.
Okay. A potential with a social media page with many opposite gender followers.
Red.
A person that does not speak to his family, in other words, lives independently.
Reddish.
A person that has a bad past but is a good person today.
Green.
A person that is 30 plus in age, no education, and earns 25k.
Is there anything else good about him, like deen and cooking?
I don't know. That's just the scenario. Red, amber, or green.
Amber.
Okay. A person that suffered abuse in the past but has healed today.
Green.
Okay. And that brings us on to the rapid fire round. Radiya, can I just say, a rapid fire round is a rapid fire, like you give the answers quickly, not like 10 years later. Once you are married, where would you take your spouse to eat on a first date?
Why would I be taking my spouse out to eat? I want to be taken
What's the best age to get married?
any age, even 70.
What percentage of British Muslims looking for marriage are serious about marriage?
100%. I feel like they want it. Everybody wants it deep down.
If your spouse says to you that they want you off social media, what would be your response?
I would force them to do those really cringy, like, couple trends with me.
How long should one get to know a potential before making the decision to marry them?
About a year.
What method is the most effective to find a spouse? Apps, marriage events, matchmakers, matrimonial websites, marriage bureaus?
In person.
Mental health or physical health?
Mental.
What do you think it takes to be in a marriage that lasts forever?
Friends.
If there was a book written on you, what would be the title of the book?
P.S. We got this.
Your social media handle, right? Okay. What do British Muslims say privately but hesitate to admit publicly?
Everybody wants to be seen, heard, and loved deep down.
Jazakumullah khair, Sister Radiya, for joining our podcast. Thank you very much.
Jazakallah for having me.
If you want to be a guest on this podcast, or if you want to contact us, then please email us. Our email address is divorcedmuslims@gmail.com.
تباريكي